The LA Clippers are ready to begin their 7-game Grammy road trip. And if you know LA basketball, you know that those road trips are huge for the LA teams at a very crucial part of the season right before the All-Star break. Let's look at the schedule, predict the Clippers record, also preview the game against Toronto on Friday. And should Kawhi Leonard have been an All-Star starter? He wasn't. Going to be talking about it all on today's Locked On. It's the Weekend Clippers.
You are Locked On Clippers, your daily Los Angeles Clippers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, sir. You are locking in with the Clips. Thank you for making Locked On Clippers the first listen of your day, your team every day. I'm your host, Darian Vaziri, born and raised in LA and in my 19th season as a Clipper fan. You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DimeDropperPod and subscribe to my own YouTube channel, Dime Dropper, for even more LA Clipper and LA sports content. And Locked On Clippers is free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, where I want you to give me a record prediction of our road trip. And I'm going to be telling you the games in this episode. We're going to be previewing the Toronto game and also going to be talking about whether or not Kawhi Leonard should have been an All-Star starter or not. And let's get right into it, like the dome. So, Clipper Nation, here we go. It's been 2 days off, and we are ready for the big road trip. Great news on Thursday night. It was almost excellent news because the Minnesota Timberwolves almost lost too, but the Denver Nuggets got absolutely crushed by the New York Knicks, who are playing really good basketball right now, in New York City. And thankfully, the Clippers already played the Knicks on the road earlier in the season, right when we got James Harden. So we won't have to play them right now when they're really hot. Not to say that I don't think we could beat them, but hey, the more easy games, the better. The Denver Nuggets lost. So the Clippers right now stand at 28-14 heading into this game on Friday. The Denver Nuggets are 31-15. So they've played 4 more games than us. Jesus. So it's kind of wonky in terms of like the standings, how many games back we are. But NBA, our ESPN lists it as we are 1 game behind of Denver. We have less losses, though. I always thought they prioritized the loss column, but the Nuggets do have 3 more wins than us, so I guess that overrules it. That being said, I'm starting to look at the standings now. As I've said, we are in the second half of the season, so I am looking at it a little bit. And you all know that top 3 seed is paramount to us trying to win a championship. Top 2 would be real seriousness. That's what I've really been wanting. I just have to lower my standards sometimes because every Clipper fan whines that things are unattainable and all this nonsense. But to be honest, I think we're just soft sometimes as a fan base because we're used to losing and sucking, and we need to adjust our expectations. It's just a little bit in the Ballmer era, and that's the honest truth. Like, look, I've been a fan since we've been terrible. 19-63, and I used to be like, yeah, it's okay. Well, next season we'll bounce back. But now it's like we got to get a top 2 seed. Like, let's not kid ourselves. You think a Game 7 on the road in the second round is ideal? Like, it's not. Let's get top 2 in a top 2 seed, especially if we want to play against Denver, because that's very likely. And the road goes through them unless we're lucky enough to have someone knock them out for us. So I don't know what's going to happen if the Clippers beat the Toronto Raptors on Friday, but let's just not focus on the standings for that. I just wanted to mention the Denver loss just to say Clippers win. We're inching that much closer to a 3rd seed. But the Grammy trip, right? This has always been, a tradition in the Staples Center era. Funny enough, next season when we're not in the Staples Center, is there going to be such a thing as a Grammy trip? Are we going to have to go on a 7-game East Coast road trip? Because other teams that don't play in the Staples Center, like the Warriors and the Kings, they go on East Coast road trips too to just knock out. Because, you don't want to go to the East Coast or like New England or that area, the Northeast, multiple times in a season, if as a West Coast team, you want to just get it over with on one trip. So we'll see how that Intuit Dome adjusts the Grammy trip and stuff. We know for a fact we won't have a road trip at this exact time of the year, late January, early February. Last year, the Clippers went 4-2 on this trip. And it was when we had Terrence Mann playing point guard. So we were starting to kind of turn the corner and go into the right direction. But I looked at the box score for one of the games. We were still giving Marcus Morris 30-plus minutes. We were giving Reggie Jackson minutes. And here's the thing. Reggie Jackson's been really good this year for Denver. But I caught some of the Knicks game against the Nuggets, and they had he and Jamal Murray out there together. And boy, were they getting torched. I hope they don't think they can do that in the playoffs. If they put Reggie Jackson out there with Murray, Reggie Jackson, I said when he left the Clippers last year, he might not be good enough to be in a championship rotation. I may be right on that. Who knows? If the Nuggets go back-to-back, he's going to play somewhat of a part, so I'll be wrong on that. And I love Reggie. It's not like I'm rooting against it, but I am rooting against it because I'm a Clipper fan. I don't want Denver to win again. So, sorry, Reggie. Love you, but I hope you prove me right that you can't be in a championship rotation, not this version of him. So, the Clippers, let's look at the games on this trip. 4-2 last year, as I said. We're a much better team this season. So this year, we got the Toronto Raptors on Friday. We've got, after them, the Boston Celtics on... Oh, man, it's a back-to-back, and the second night is Boston. That's brutal. Boston, I watched a little bit of their game against Miami on Thursday. There's like that starting lineup is one of the best starting lineups I've seen in my 19 years of ball. Like, Derek White is their worst starter. Like, he's been an all-star consideration this season. So that team is tough. Last time we got absolutely destroyed by them at Staples Center, but we didn't have Kawhi. So that makes a world of a difference. But we don't have Zubats this time. It'll be very interesting to see what we do. I actually think Daniel Tice wouldn't be a bad guy to start against Boston and then switch on Porzingis, because I don't think Porzingis is going to look to like bully Daniel Tice like that. I think that'd actually be an interesting matchup to do that. But it's a tough game regardless, right? So we got to win against Toronto. That's what I've realized. We got to win against Toronto because Boston's going to be tough. Then you got Cleveland on Monday, and they've been playing really well. Donovan Mitchell's on a tear right now. They don't have Garland or Mobley, and they're still playing well. They're in the 4th seed. They've been excellent. Then you have at Washington on Wednesday, the 31st. That should be a gimme. I mean, they're a joke of a basketball team right now. Just fired their head coach, Wes Unseld Jr. Then, speaking of joke of a basketball team, no offense, by the way, to any of you fans listening to this. If you're from a Wizards fan, I apologize. I think you'd agree with me, though, to be honest. And then at Detroit, another joke. At 4 o'clock Pacific time. Those two should be auto wins. Auto. And then you have at Miami on Sunday, February 4th. That's going to be a battle. So be prepared. That'll be on ESPN, by the way, at 3 o'clock. And then at Atlanta, that could go either way. They're not very good. They can't really guard a chair right now. But who knows? They still have Trae Young and DeJounte Murray, so you don't want to underestimate them. And then that's the last game of the trip. So 7 games. Let's see. I'm going to say we beat Toronto, lose to Boston. Let's say we beat Cleveland, beat Washington, beat Detroit, lose to Miami, and then beat Atlanta. So I'm going to say we're going to go 5-2 on this trip. But the Miami, Cleveland, and Boston games, those are going to be tough. Give me your record prediction in the comments below. Coming up, going to be looking at the game against Toronto, one step at a time. First game, how do we get a win in the 6th? Going to be talking about that coming up. I got to tell you a little something about eBay Motors. Our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Basketball host Josh Lloyd to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week, all season long. Whether you're prepping for a daily draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So let's see who Josh has picked out for us on this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. You know what? I'm going to go with Patrick Williams. While Zach LaVine is out, Williams gets a minutes and usage bump, enough to be put into consideration for fantasy leagues. I'm going with Patrick Williams. Actually, you know what? Scratch that. I'm going to go with Brandon Miller, not Patrick Williams. And because Terry Rozier just got traded, you're going to see a lot more minutes for Brandon Miller, probably a lot more shot attempts going up for Brandon Miller, so I would go with him. Josh Lloyd from Locked On Fantasy Basketball is going to help you win your fantasy championship, and eBay Motors knows a championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof rack, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, Clippers, Raptors, Friday night. You already know the deal. 4:30 local time. Ladies and gentlemen, the Toronto Raptors are an interesting team. They don't have a good record at all, 16-28. They made the trade for Emmanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett, and it started out looking pretty good when they beat the Cleveland Cavaliers in that first game that they played with them. And then they beat the Grizzlies. They were 3-1 in those first 4 games with those two. And then they proceeded to lose 4 consecutive games. But they were tough games. It was at Lakers, at Clippers. Remember that one? And that wasn't an easy game for us. We only won 126-120. Then they lost to a red-hot Utah Jazz team. And then lost to the Celtics, which there's nothing to be ashamed of with those. They beat the Heat after that by 24 points. Now, with the Heat, you probably know there was a couple of injuries there, load management or something. But after that, so at that point, it looked like they were okay. 3 straight losses going into this game on Friday. Losing to the Bulls in Toronto, at New York getting 26-pieced, and then losing to Memphis, who we know how depleted they are right now. So Toronto's definitely not in the playoff picture or the play-in picture this year. I thought for a second they'd be in the play-in picture, but if they traded Siakam, which I was always a little bit skeptical on, I thought maybe they'd pay him. If they traded Siakam away, I knew, they're not going to be in the play-in conversation, so they're not going to be. And they're playing the Clippers on a 3-game losing streak. Looking at that, I thought this game was going to be even a little bit tougher. Yes, you're playing a desperate team, but sometimes losing habits just find a way to make themselves become regular. When a team is not really trying to win games. Like, let's be honest, they're looking for the future. They're looking to build around Scotty Barnes, so they're going to probably try to get a higher draft pick this year. And I'm pretty sure they have their pick, but I'm not 100% on that. I think they have their pick. I don't know why they wouldn't. They're still technically in the play-in conversation. They're only 2 games behind Atlanta, but I think Atlanta's just better. Now, they're a team to watch as well. They're on a 3-game losing streak as well, and we're playing them on the road trip as well. And I say they're a team to watch because DeJounte Murray, especially with his name being rumored to come across the hall, I would keep an eye out on that. Toronto definitely seems like they have more of a direction going forward for a franchise than Atlanta. Atlanta, I'm not sure what they want to do. Like, they clearly want to build around Trae Young. But I don't know. This isn't Locked On Hawks. You can check that out with Brad Rowland, though. Anyway, Toronto. Not a great 3-point shooting team. I know they've gotten a little bit better in that department since getting RJ Barrett and Emmanuel Quickley, who have been good for them. But I think the key is to just be better defensively than we were against them last time. They scored 120 points. And they're not good enough offensively to be doing that. I think we throw Kawhi Leonard on Scotty as the primary defender. Obviously, you have Mason Plumlee matching up against Jakob Poeltl. And then you'll have RJ Barrett and IQ in the backcourt. Definitely, I would say, putting James Harden on Gary Trent. That would be my go-to. I think he starts for the Raptors. Yeah, Gary Trent Jr. Last game they started Michael Porter Jr.'s brother. So I think Jakob is out right now. So it's going to be Jonte Porter, that's his name. I always forget it because Javon Porter plays for Pepperdine. Jonte Porter will be starting at the 5. Chris Boucher will probably get a decent amount of those minutes. So I say we go with Plumlee or Tice starting. It's going to be Plumlee probably because that's what they've been doing lately. But I think Tice might be a better fit for this matchup because Porter's going to try to pick and pop. And I think if we just switch that action, Daniel Tice is very similar size-wise to Jonte Porter, and he'll be able to just kind of nullify that pick and roll threat. So Harden will be guarding Gary Trent. you'll have Paul George probably on RJ Barrett, and then Terrence on Emmanuel Quickly, and then we'll switch 1 through 4. I think the most problematic matchup probably is Harden guarding Emmanuel Quickly. If they try to switch onto that, I think Harden will hold his own against Scotty Barnes quite nicely because of how good he is in the post. Maybe a couple of Harden steals. But Scotty Barnes, he's really the guy to watch. We really kept him in check last time. Like, he was invisible when he played against us at Staples Center. I was at that game. You can catch a vlog of that on my channel. But he only had 12 points and 10 shot attempts in that game against us. Expect a lot more aggression in this one. He's averaging 20 points a game this year on 48% shooting and 37 from 3. He's really improved in that department. That was his major weakness, and he's gotten a lot better in that regard. As far as the Clippers, Kawhi Leonard, he is playing really good basketball right now. He's a former Raptor, a Finals MVP for the Raptors, the only one they've ever had, brought the championship to the Six. So I expect to see him go off. He's had some really good games in Toronto. Same goes for Norman Powell. I expect to see him have a good game. And I think the biggest keys I'm going to be watching is the defense. We defended really poorly in our last game against the Lakers. We allowed 116 points to a Laker team without LeBron. In the game against the Nets, we allowed 114 points to the Nets. We've allowed at least 114 points in our last 3 games. And that's not necessarily championship level defense. So I want to see an improvement, especially against a struggling Toronto team. By the way, if my voice sounds nasally, more nasally than usual, it's because I'm still getting over like a cold. So yeah, I'm not 100%. Anyway, coming up, going to be talking about Kawhi Leonard. Should he have been an all-star starter? He wasn't. Let's talk about it. I got to tell you a little something about Grammarly. When it comes to writing, Grammarly is there to support you from start to finish. For over 10 years, Grammarly has been powered by AI technology you can trust to help you across all the places where you write the most. And now, Grammarly helps you do even more. With one click, you can easily brainstorm, rewrite, and reply with suggestions based on your context and goals. Grammarly can help you save time, enhance creativity, and accomplish more than what you're already accomplishing. When you're stuck with writing at work, Grammarly can help you get started with ideas, outlines, and even tips. Need to polish your writing? Grammarly can help paraphrase and rewrite to be more concise instantly. Big presentation coming up? Let Grammarly create a personalized outline to get you organized so you can make your presentation neat and ready to transition from one point to the next. Start being more productive at work. Go to Grammarly.com/podcast to download for free today. That's Grammarly.com/podcast. That's GRAMMARLY.com/podcast. That's Grammarly. All right. So, by the way, Paul George is active for the Toronto game, which was scary. That groin injury, they were saying, the team is managing it. But if there's any indication that this team is chasing wins right now, going for every game, it's this. This is the type of injury that they would have been like, we're going to load manage. And for all we know, they could load manage on Saturday. But knowing them last season, I think they would have given him the rest on the first game and then said, we'll save you for that. We'll give you an extra rest, so you get 3 days off, and then we play in the game that matters more against Boston. But I think it's more attainable to get a win here, so we got to take advantage of it. So Paul George is playing, and that makes me very happy. Speaking of playing in games, there's an AllStar game coming up in Indianapolis, and there's been a lot of talks and a lot of talk on this show. Who should be an All-Star? How many All-Stars should the Clippers have? We have 3 candidates with Paul George, James Harden, and Kawhi. Kawhi's a lock. The other 2, I'm not sure. When realizing how much the talent the Western Conference has, it's hard. You got Kyrie Irving. You've got Anthony Davis. You've got Jamal Murray. You've got, obviously, Paul George, James Harden. You've got Brandon Ingram. You've got, because I say Brandon Ingram because I don't think Zion's going to be an All-Star. You've got Anthony Edwards. So there's a lot of choices. Even Alperen Şengün has a case this year. The question for me was, actually, it's not even, and Devin Booker I didn't even mention. Here's the thing. Kawhi Leonard was never going to be an all-star starter because he's not as popular as Kevin Durant and LeBron. And a lot of the vote for the starting is weighted by the fans. And I never expected that. But I just wanted to talk about the case. Does he deserve to be an all-star starter over those two guys? I think so. I mean, Kevin Durant, it's a little bit harder for me to say because his stats are really good. He's had to carry the Suns at times without Booker and Beal. So, the Suns have dealt with more injuries this year than we have, for once. And then KD and the Suns are playing really good basketball right now, and they're on our tails in the standings. So, I think KD deserves this spot. LeBron, I watch basically every single night for the Lakers because it's local television, and I do it for Dime Dropper. Nah. LeBron has better counting stats. He has better averages, points, rebounds, assists, which he's always been amazing at filling up the stat sheet in those categories. But LeBron has a lot of games. I wouldn't say a lot, but there are games that he doesn't really put 100%. And everyone always says, well, it's because of his age. Fine. So I'm not taking a 39-year-old LeBron over this Kawhi, regardless of the stats. Kawhi has no bad defensive games, really. At worst, they're mediocre. LeBron, to me, he'll have, out of a 3-game stretch, he'll have one good defensive game, he'll have one decent defensive game, and then he'll have one where he doesn't really even put in effort and just sits on the block and ready to help, but isn't really closing out to shooters and guarding really bad players. Kawhi just carries more of a defensive responsibility, too. And they're just different players. Also, you have to notice that Kawhi's playing on a super team. LeBron right now is not. So Kawhi is, he doesn't have to be as aggressive. And that contributes to things. So Kawhi Leonard, and we're a better team too, and winning is part of these things. Kawhi Leonard should have been a starter over LeBron, but you knew he was never going to start over, one of the most popular athletes in the history of the world. So it is what it is. I just wanted to make my point that Kawhi Leonard has been playing better than LeBron. Sorry to any Laker fans watching, and LeBron fans I don't even feel sorry for. If you're watching, that one guy that always comments on the videos, just talking about LeBron. Here you go. You're getting what you wanted, buddy. I'm talking about LeBron, and I'm talking about how Kawhi has been better than him. Kawhi, here's how I'd rank the players in LA this year. It's Kawhi number 1, and Anthony Davis not that far behind. He's really been insane this year. I got to give it to him. Anthony Davis second. I go with Paul George just because he was literally our best player for the first 20 games, and when he's playing well on both ends, I don't think James Harden quite can equal that, and I think his game is, I think it's better, it's more easily adaptable to the postseason as a second option. I think James Harden as a first option definitely was closer to winning a ring than Paul. So if you want to say James Harden's better all time than Paul George, I definitely can see that. And honestly, even though I'm much more of a Paul George guy than James Harden, I might have to say James Harden over Paul George all time, maybe, at this point. As a number 1, I think James Harden, getting to 7 games against Golden State, that was closer. I know the Pacers got to 7 games against the Heat, but the Rockets, I was really believing that they could win at one point. I didn't really believe that the Pacers could win, except for 2012, but Chris Bosh was out for some of that series, so a little different. But and yes, I know Chris Paul was out in 2018, but I'm saying that they were down because Chris Bosh was out, whereas the Rockets took the lead with Chris Paul, so I thought they were going to potentially win. I was still pretty confident in the Warriors and the Heat to win, though, to be honest. But point is, it's not about all time. James Harden, Paul George, you can have that argument in the comments. I don't care. But this season, you could also have that argument, too. Who's been better between Harden and Paul George? It's really a toss-up. I go with Paul George by a smidge, and you can say I'm biased because he's been a Clipper longer. But James Harden right after. Actually, no. LeBron after AD. LeBron after AD. Then Paul George, James Harden. And then Russell Westbrook probably. But yeah, I think LeBron has still been better than Harden and Paul just because he carries more weight on his team and he has to do more. And he's still been pretty good. But that would be my order. I don't think Harden's going to make it because he has to deal with De'Aaron Fox, who I didn't even mention, Anthony Edwards, Devin Booker. So it's very competitive. Paul George, he has a chance. When inside the NBA, they always predict the reserves. All four of them, Kenny, Charles, Shaq, and Ernie, they all had Paul George, but none of them had Harden, which I think maybe they're sleeping a little bit. But as I said, there's so many guards. But I like that they all had Paul George unanimously. So I'll take it. As long as we get two guys in there, I'm cool. But yeah, Kawhi should have been a starter. Let me know what you guys think in the comments about everything I talked about. The record prediction for the trip, and then you can talk All-Stars if you want. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DimeDropperPod. Subscribe to my own YouTube channel, Dime Dropper, where I'm going to be live directly after the game. And you can also follow me on Twitter. I already said Twitter and Instagram. You got to subscribe to Locked On Clippers. Locked On Clippers on YouTube. You can listen wherever you get your podcast. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts if you'd like. And yeah, make sure you hit the notification bell so you know every single time we post a video. The age-old proverb continues. Grammy road trip time. Go Clippers.